outside, street, front door, porch, address, foyer, living room, dining room, kitchen, bedroom, looking down the basement. If it's got an upstairs, up the stairs, go up, take a picture of all the bedrooms. I like to take a picture of the thresholds of between the two rooms so they can see when it transitions out from the carpet to the, to the hardwood. And the bathroom, take a photo of the toilet, the sink, the shower, the tile, the roof, the door, all of that stuff. Because if the more photos you take of it, the less questions you get and the less looky-loos that call you and say, well, what about that? And what about this? If the ceiling's falling down in the living room because the roof is leaking, take a photo of that. Don't let go around it. Because when that guy shows up to look at that house, he's going to be mad at you that you didn't tell him about the leaky roof. I always like to get a couple zoom photos of the roof itself so that you can see the curled up roof or the good roof, whichever. I have an attachment that goes on my iPhone. They call it a fisheye. So basically it takes those rooms and makes it a wide angle photo. You'd be really surprised at how much better those photos look with that fisheye on your phone. It just clamps on top of the, so that the lens on your phone looks through it, and you get a lot better. What do you call panoramic view of the room, especially bathrooms, right? You try to take a photo of a bathroom, all you get is this little skinny door in the floor. If you have that fisheye on there, then it takes the whole thing and it just gives it a better look.
Okay, I was just going to stop you for 1 second because I wanted to touch on something you said.
Okay.
Well, two things. I can't reiterate enough. I take pictures of the worst parts of the house. That's not what I'm going to use as my front picture, but every single investor is going to see that crack in the basement wall. And on top of all the reasons he said, you also, if it's a seller occupied property, don't want to be bringing investors through who could have told you they weren't interested based on the pictures. So I tell my investors, because I know some of them will say, when can I see it? They'll call me a second after I send it out. Hey, when can I see it? And my response is, right now, go look on your text. You have all the photos. Look at the photos, actually look into the details, and then get back with me. And a lot of times they'll come back and say, oh, I saw the pictures, I don't want it. But they would have just gotten through just because they want to get out there and see if there is any chance of it being a deal. And then do not, and he said this, but if there's one thing you take away from this when you're trying to sell a deal, don't put repair costs, don't put after repair value. I sold the deal yesterday. I signed it yesterday to a guy. Everyone I had talked to was thinking 55,000 was the ARV. He told me he was going to sell it for 70 minimum, the guy who's buying it. And this guy's he owns tons of houses, way more houses than me. He's serious. So if I would have told him this was the ARV, this is what I was asking, he might have just completely bypassed the deal. And then repair costs, everyone's repair costs are different. So like he was talking about earlier, you have your serious buyers who flip 10 houses a year. They have crews in place. Their costs are going to be different than your neighbor who stumbled upon 50 grand and is going to do all the work himself and put his teenagers to work on the house. So those two things will deter buyers from not wanting to buy your houses when they may have very well wanted to buy them. So that is gold. Do not forget that. Don't put repair costs. I have buyers ask me, how much does it need in work? And I do not tell them. And Mike can attest to this. I never tell them. I'll be in the office and just say, just judge for yourself. I took a ton of pictures, judge for yourself, because I'm always wrong. And it's just going to make me look bad. Even if I'm 1,000 under, that's just not my job as a wholesaler. I just present them the deal. However they want to make it a deal, that's how it's going to be. But yeah, that was great. Everything he said there, that's exactly what I do almost. I learned a lot from him. I remember 8 months ago, I sent out a MailChimp, and he responded and said, don't put exclamation points or don't say will sell fast, because that was on my header, because buyers don't like that. And now that I'm more experienced, I don't like that when I get that in my email. So that's because it's just I don't want to say non-professional, but it's completely unnecessary. So a follow-up question to what you were saying, Ron. And you kind of touched on this, but how can you tell who is a good buyer and who is a bad or not so good buyer? How do you kind of, how do you kind of choose the ones that are good? You obviously said the ones that won't beat you up about having big assignment fees, but what are some other things you look for when you're vetting cash buyers?
Something that might be superficial is bringing clipboards with them and I have to write everything down. And I don't say that to be, to be critical of you, but generally the guy that walks through and looks at the house in his head walks out the door and knows what he's going to pay. Those are the guys I like. And I tend to, my claim to fame is memory and just good negotiating skills. That's what I'm best at. I learned how to value homes. That was something I learned just over time. But the more to answer your question, Carson, is it's a feel, it's a gut feel. Because I'll just apply that to you. Is that when you came up to me at that meeting, I knew right away that you would be good, because I could tell by how you were asking me questions. You were humble in your questions to me, and then how I know even a good wholesaler like yourself, as you turned out to be, is you take the advice that the guy that you were seeking advice from and actually go do it, instead of like call me back and fuss at me about you did this or did that. It's just it's a gut feeling for me in regards to who's a good wholesaler and who's going to be a good buyer. And a lot of times I'll just look them up on the MLS and up on the public records and see how many houses they purchased, because they all talk big about this or that, or, I get, in the course of what I try to do with my buyers list is not to give it a broad spectrum for people to get into it. If you want on my list, you need to ask me personally. But the way that I do that passively is my inventory is on an Excel Google spreadsheet. That's a hot sheet. So that's in real time. So all you have to do is click on that link, and everything I have is always there. So then and of course I use a MailChimp style system. So when I send that email out, it tracks who opens it, right? So now you can track on who those guys are that actually click on the link. Not only can I tell that they opened it, I can tell that they actually clicked on the photo link. My encouragement to you is you don't need to be that sophisticated to sell houses. I first started out, it wasn't even that long ago that I was using Google Groups out of a single Gmail account, because you could get a lot of spam from that, and you could only send out so many emails a day out of Gmail. So I had a specific account that when it got shut down, because I sent it out to 5,000 people, or I tried to, it wouldn't shut me down on my own email. So that when people responded to that, when it went to my email box anyway, I just responded out of another email box. But my point is, you can simply create Google groups, and you can track. Gmail has a tracking software, like an add-on or a plugin, or whatever you want to call it. You can tell who's opening it, and then you can tell those guys that open those emails, those are the good guys. Those are the good ones. I think like I said, to kind of get back to answer your question, it's more of a gut feel for me, just because I've been around human nature for so long. It's people just do what they do, right? And the guys that are blowing smoke, and the one thing that frustrates me the most is the guy that's daisy chaining my deal and doesn't tell me. Those guys I can smell pretty quick, because they're willing to offer full price without even seeing the house, and then they wonder why I asked them a question. Sounds like you're wholesaling my wholesale. Blah blah blah. Then then I just go down the road with them. So, and I think that there's a lot of new people getting in the game. Like I said about you, I could tell that you were hungry, that you were looking for information, you were willing to execute it, and of course you did. It didn't take you long to kind of get your feet underneath you. What I'm thankful for is you're not in my market, that you're in Genesee County. That's what I'm thankful for, because
Not yet, man. Not yet.
Yes. So you would be some huge competition to me walking in behind you or you walking behind me as we're trying to pull deals down, right? And you've got some good
I
research.
think honestly though that we would do a ton of business together.
Absolutely.
And starting out more than down the road, once if I were to build up a huge list and everything down there, but there's quite a few. There's one guy in Flint who's on this call, and we do a lot of business together. We both have big buyers lists, and it all comes back. We're able to do so much business together, and we'll have the right buyer for each other's deals, and like it's for the slim ones, so it's not for every deal. And I'm sure there's deals that he gets that I would have gotten in a week if he didn't, type thing, 100%. But there's definitely those deals where I might know that one buyer that I made a connection with who's perfect fit for his one deal, and we're able to do a ton of business together. So, but yeah, I mean that's all that stuff is great as far as.
And I think that you need to pay attention to your feedback, to your initial blast, to your deals. If you hear crickets in the first, usually if I hear crickets in the first couple hours, I know I'm wrong. And then I'm just going to have to long play it, right? But if I hear something really quick, and even if I hear something really quick, that just means the location's good. But I get no offers, that means the location's good and the price is bad. So, so pay attention to that feedback, and then don't be greedy when you're getting down the road and you have to price change. There's no shame in changing the price, and there's no shame in taking less or just taking enough. I can count on my hand a handful of deals where I've just taken because I want my reputation with the seller community, because the sellers give, go onto Google, they go onto the BBB, if you have a BBB page, they go on there and they leave reviews. And if you messed with them or got out of a deal with them, that one bad review, it does more harm than the good that 10 good ones do. And you really need to just get rid of deals that you said you were going to buy and just be out of them. I've never sold anything at a negative on purpose. I've bought lots of houses where I've taken them down and owned them and then lost money. But I've never gotten out of a wholesale deal where I've had to give up cash to go to the close. Normally, I'll just give it up and then the wholesaler or the rehabber and I just have an understanding that will just catch me on the next one, so that we can just get that deal done. Which kind of forges your relationship with them, so that they come to you for deals and they don't negotiate with you. I've got 3 guys right now that don't negotiate with me. In other words, what they tell me is what they're going to pay. And when I respond back to them is what I'm willing to take. So sometimes I say, well, I can't wait. I can't do that today. I need some more time to let it fester. And then I'll go back to them, the good buyers, you go back to them and say, hey, I just couldn't get rid of it at this price. You still in at this one? More times than not, they say yes. They'll always they'll always stick at their number. And those are good buyers. Those are great buyers.
I try to hey Ron, like pricing your deals, do you try to price them where you want? I always try to price them where I want. I'm happy if I get it. I really don't want people to go over that. I'm looking for that price. What do you do on that?
Well, generally when I'm negotiating, I'm already trying to put 10 on top. That's usually my minimum. And then if I look at it and I reevaluate it later and say, well, maybe I could squeeze a couple more dollars out of it, then I'll go up to 15. Because there's a huge dichotomy there in regards to, are you leaving money on the table or not, right?
Right.
If you blast it out to your list and you get a bunch of activity, and and the first guy comes in at 5 under, the next guy's 5 over, obviously you're going to try to take the 5 over. But also I'm interested in why that guy's 5 over. Why is that? Because that means that what did I do wrong on the sell when I was pricing it? And that becomes a lot of kind of a gut feel too, because I've done hundreds of thousands of BPOs in 20 years, and it's just a natural. I just know sometimes what the market will do, and because you sell enough houses, that why is the house on the next block over 20 grand more than where you're at? Why
Well,
is that?
yeah. Well, sometimes they might, you know, they might only want to make 20,000 instead of 25. Their rehabs might be less. They might have in-house listing, so they could take 15,000 or 20,000 profit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
5,000 is not too crazy, but yeah, if it's like do you always put it out to your list, or do you try to get, a lot of times I don't email a lot. I'm more Facebook, I'm more bringing the buyer with me, or just picking up the phone and calling a couple of people. That's really, I have good success that way. When I put it out to the email, that means I'm having problems.
Yes. I would agree with that. I guess when I decide not to send it to my list, it's because of access issues more than price issues. Because that's how I learned how to bring people with me. Like I was having especially during COVID,
Right.
when I went back into the field May 1st, before you were supposed to, people are afraid, right? So how do you get that deal done quickly? The byproduct of the pricing became something that just happened. And I had one guy, I went a house in Southfield, and I already had the seller at 71, and he walked out the door and said, "Ryan, I'll give you 100." Okay, that'll work. So that was a no-brainer, right? But my point being is that was the one that just caught me, like, yeah, what a great idea. And because this lady had a brother in the house that had a hard time getting me in the house, let alone me bringing by another couple buyers, right? So I thought the only way to overcome that was to do it all at the same time and not have to blast it out. So if I have a house that's on a lockbox that's vacant and the seller's out of state, I'll send people in there all day long.
Right.
And usually I'll text the few guys I know will like it, because I don't necessarily like the highest and best thing. Sometimes that's too much work. The highest and best guy doesn't always close. So it's easier just to have the trusted advisor, in a sense, that let's just be done with it, right?
Right.
I don't need to make an extra $3,000. I just want another deal under my belt. Yep. And some more activity. That's what I want.
Right. But one thing I just learned this week or last week, I can't even remember what day it is right now, but I had like 4 or 5 buyers go to a hot property. I knew it would sell that day, and they were my good buyers. So I knew all of them are going to want it. And one of them gave me what I was asking. One came in lower, and he was first. And I pretty much, I know how to handle it now, and I'll tell you what I would do now differently. And I got an offer for full price. It was in Bagley, in Detroit. I got an $80,000 offer. And then after I committed, once I say I'm committed, I don't care if I have a contract or not. You could give me 20 grand more. I'm not going to take it, of course. That you're not going to be around this town long if you do that.
No.
And then an hour later, I got an offer for $5,000 more. And then the guy that offered me 10 grand less came up 6 grand more. So I could have made, it's like I left 6 grand or 5 grand on the table. But I was happy with the price I was asking. Cash sale, fast. They were smart. The buyer was smart to give me what I wanted, and they acted fast. This was like 2 hours after I showed the property. So what I'm going to do next time, just I'm going to tell the 4 or 5, I call them the VIP buyers of mine. And I don't do this all the time, but this one was a different situation. I had one opportunity to get into the house. I had to sell it fast, and I'm going to let them know that. And I'm going to say, look, you guys, I'm going to let you guys, I want to sell it to all 5 of you, but I'm going to, I can't, only one's going to get it. So 20, I'm going to give you till tomorrow at 8 o'clock, today at 7 o'clock PM. Just send me a text, your highest and best. And again, I'm not looking for the highest offer. I'm looking for a quick close, fast, and the best offer. I'm not trying for, I don't want them to compete against each other, but they're going to have to if they want it, right? But
that's how you teach them not to negotiate with you, right? Because of the first time they lose it, then they bellyache at you. You say, well, look, I told you to give me your best offer.
Right.
You know, I would have given, well, how much it, because obviously they generally tend to find out what you sold it for. And then they say, well, I would have paid that. Well, so then you should have said that.
Right.
So that's how I've taught, in a sense, given the boundaries to my best buyers, is to say, here's what's going to happen, because your integrity is key there. You have to honor your word. And if they came in and you said 7:00 was the deadline, and all 5 of them sent you an offer, and then you picked one, you can't renege on that just because you get more cash, right? You have to follow through with that so that it makes sense, because then they will absolutely 100% trust you the next time, every time. And I developed that whole process in my REO days, because just think about what REO brokers do today. If they get a deal, they're always about the highest and best, right? Back in my early days, you had to feed the asset manager a piece of paper with the offers on it. It wasn't electronic like it is, where you put offers in through a website. In the early days, everything was paper, and you could easily not send in your deal so that you got the double commission instead of the other. And I made it a point that I never did that. I had lots of investors mad at me because they didn't get the deal because I didn't shove their deal through. And I live off of that reputation today, to be honest with you. That's how I operate today. And people understand that, they know that about me.
Yeah, that's something that some of you guys know this, but my first wholesale had a situation happen to me, and I didn't handle it well. And there was a wholesaler I bought it from in March, actually, of this year, who we agreed on price, and then he got an offer, I mean, a couple hours later for like 3,000 more. So he called me and said, oh, well, I got another offer, sorry. And he had given me his word that we had a deal. And on the seller side, on the buyer side, on the relationship with wholesaler side, your word is everything. And I would give up $20,000 on a deal in a heartbeat to have my word stay intact. I don't care what the situation is, but you are going to lose more than $20,000 if your word is not, if your word isn't upheld or whatever. And I've seen that happen to wholesalers, and like I said, I will lose $20,000. And when you're doing your first deal, we agreed on it later for like 3,000 more. We had a deal. I'll just do it this one. Your word is everything in a heartbeat. The word is not. If your word $1,000, and when you're doing your first deal, but that's absolutely not true. And it's hard. I get it's hard when you're doing your first deal, but along with that, because when you're starting out wholesaling and you're dealing with buyers and you're dealing with sellers, you're going to mess up as expenses that are going to have to fall on somebody. And you have to be willing to take those hits starting out. Like, for example, if you don't tell a buyer he has to pay all the closing costs, and you forget to put it on your agreement with him, but it's on his agreement with the seller, something like that, a miscommunication because you're new, and you get to closing and that buyer had no idea he was responsible to pay all the closing costs. You could say, well, you signed this paper, but maybe you never even showed him the original agreement. I would take that hit on myself to have a good relationship with that buyer, because the next deal he buys from you, you might make 10 grand on it. So I would do that all day just to keep my word, because that's huge in this business. And people get around. I mean, Michigan is not a big market. It's a big market, but all the big players know each other. And if and I know people who do not stick to their word and their names are tarnished, and people will send me their deals all the time instead of other people, because they know that I will, I'll do what I'll say I'm going to do pretty much. And that's just what it comes down to. If you do that, you'll be fine, even if it means taking a hit in the beginning. So about how you sell houses, Ron. So if you send out a house at 150,000, and you get a ton of calls, like let's say you have pretty easy access to it. You don't have a lockbox, but the sellers don't care how many it's vacant. They'll show you, let you in a million times if you need to. And you have somebody call you and say they want it. As soon as you send it out for 150,000 at asking price, do you accept that right away? Or do you say, I need to let this one sit, even though they're giving you asking price? How do you handle that without, kind of pissing off a buyer?
Well, if they haven't seen it, I don't take offers. I don't accept anything if they haven't seen the house yet. Because everybody, the ones that are hot that want to do that, they usually change their mind in some form. So if they've seen the house already in some way, maybe they were in it before. Because a lot of times sellers are always looking, it's on the market before they've ever called you or found you. So sometimes that's to my qualifying question is, have you seen it? No. Well, here's how to get it. Go look, call me back. Do it as soon as you can, because obviously you're not the only one. If you like it, like if it's a guy on my list I don't normally call, but I know he's a good buyer, I'll just say, hey, better go look at it because you're not the only one calling. And then they'll go look at it and then send it back to me. I generally go ahead.
What if he had seen it already? I mean, like, let's say he had talked to the seller and already seen it.
I don't know. That's if it's within the first half hour and I've got 30 inquiries, no, I'm not going to sell it to the first guy that gives me the price. I need to let that fester a little bit. If it's been on the market for 2 days, then yes, I'll probably just accept it, whatever that number is. I understand what you're trying to get to is like, when is the right time to take it off the market? I think it goes to what you you say you're going to do. I think you need to feel out that buyer, what that buyer's like. How many houses he bought from you before? Has he ever gotten out of a deal? I've had buyers back out of deals and not squawk about their EMDs, but still that's a bad taste with the seller because he doesn't have to deal with the seller you do when he backs out, even if he kept his money. So I think I don't think there's a hard, fast rule to that. I think you just have to understand what your house is. And, if it's a house in Wyandotte that's backing up to the railroad tracks and the guy gives you an offer the first 5 minutes, I think you take that deal. I think that's what you do, especially if he's seen it. But if it's, like in the middle of Livonia somewhere and it's a cookie cutter ranch that the ARV is 200 and you're at 100, I think you take that deal or you wait to give it some more time to kind of get through. My email blasts tend to go out in the mornings on purpose because that's when most of the guys that are buying houses they get up, they drink their coffee, they're looking through their email list anyway. So that usually get that hit. And I can tell because I use a system called Klaviyo. Invariable, the first 30 minutes of that email hitting their boxes is this big like ramp up, because it's like a bar graph, right? It goes up and whoosh, it just falls off. And then it kind of trickles through the day. So I've realized that that's when it is. The heat is always at the beginning. Because everybody is looking for houses. That's what they're doing. They're looking. And if they're interested, they hit you back. Now, in my case, it's an assistant. I have an assistant that does that. But I still monitor the responses and the click-throughs so that I can kind of tell. Because I can actually build a sub-list off of that, too. So that if it gets down the roadaways and I change the price, then I can send it to that sub-list without blasting it to all 800 people again.
Gotcha. So the reason I asked that is I don't, starting out, I didn't know anyone in real estate, no experience. So I've, even in the past 6 months, sent deals out at too low of a price. And typically what I do with my buyers is first come, first serve. So they know if they want it, they call me, they get it at that price. So I've sent a couple of houses out at a not way too low price, but at a price that I could have sold it for $8,000 more if I would have understood the market. But because the way I have it set up with my buyers, the first person who called me and said they wanted it, I just took it. And I didn't know how to get out of that without offending that buyer because they saw my email. I'm offering this property for this much money. they went there right away. They were the first person there, or one of the first people, and the first kid to get back with me. Like, and I'm sure it's not black and white, but is there a way to set that up in a way where you can get around that and maximize the profit of that deal if you don't know how to run your numbers well?
Well, I think that if you got, 3, 4, or 5 buyers, I text them all ahead of time anyway and say, hey, this is getting blasted out, and next morning or whatever. And I think, Carson, to answer your question, it's got to be in your gut and how you feel about that, and you'll get better at that, I think. And kind of like you attested to before, is that your word is the Bible, in a sense, in regards to you've got to stand behind it. So as you learn maybe what your buyer does, because usually if you get one of those buyers that does that to you every time and then negotiates with you every time, obviously you learn that that's what he's doing, and then you just don't take his deal, right? Generally, if I bring the guy with me and he gives me a number that I can then negotiate with the seller, I don't go to anybody else with that. I always take their deal. I got this one guy that I took to a house in Pontiac that I had been to twice already. He walked all the way through, walks out the back door, tells me his number. I said, done. Jessica, my assistant, will send you the assignment doc in a couple hours. And it wasn't me negotiating with him either. So I think you just have to kind of learn that at first. I think if you're brand spanking new, you've never done a deal, I think you just get your feet wet and get that first one done. Yeah. Because you'll learn so much in your head. Your head will stretch after that first deal's under your belt, to then be able to, remember back what you did, right? What were you thinking? What were you feeling? How did that buyer react to you to you? Because there's only, like I said, there's only 4 or 5 I don't negotiate with. Otherwise, I'll negotiate with everybody to stretch it out a little bit.
I know that guy, Ron.